Hello, I'm Dana Krueger. I lead the healthcare sector here at Russell Reynolds, and I'd like to welcome you to our series on leadership on the front lines of COVID-19. And today I have the pleasure of sharing some time with Luc Hermans. Luc is the president of Japan for Gilead Sciences, and he is also the team leader for the coronavirus response team externally focused. So he is responsible for remdesivir. Welcome, Luc. Great to have the opportunity to talk to you today about leadership. And maybe to kick us off, you can tell us a little bit about the context in which you are currently operating as a leader at Gilead.
First of all, thank you, Dana, for asking me. It's a pleasure to be with you. So the context is really that when I was still working in Japan, the company was, because of its past and the work in coronaviruses and the work around remdesivir, gearing up the whole activity to see whether the work that we had done could result in a potential benefit and treatment for COVID-19. And this is when there was a decision taken to bring the various content experts together, but also to make sure that we would have someone who could look across the various initiatives and make sure that we had sort of an enterprise-wide lens on it. And that's what I was asked to come and do. And initially, of course, it was moving to Foster City, where our headquarters is, and to work with a team there. But then when everything started moving quickly, and also we started to see an impact in the United States, the decision was taken to move everyone and work from home, which included me, which is why I'm working from Belgium now.
Your long and esteemed career in the industry, Luc, has given you many different leadership challenges and opportunities. Your background, maybe a few minutes on your background, because ultimately, you're leading a large commercial organization, but it would be interesting to understand the leadership challenge you have as this response team leader and how your background has prepared you for that.
So I think the good thing is that when you have a long career is that you can look at many principles. So my background is I'm a physician by training. I never practiced, moved straight into the industry, but that allows you to get to know quite a bit more about the development organizations and what they do, and how that links to the commercial world. And then I spent quite a bit of time in different parts of the organizations that I worked for, but also in different elements of the world. And now, of course, with Japan, that brings you to that too. So I think the elements of the background that helped me most with that is the fact that you've been able to see different environments, different cultures, but also how different functions work together in getting to a final goal, which is finding a drug that can deal with a potential problem. So I think that has been one of the key elements for me and how to address the situation that we're in. But it's also understanding that nothing is set. This coronavirus challenge that we're all dealing with, I think, in my mind, is rewriting the book on how you do clinical development. It's rewriting the book on how you look at access for medicines. It's rewriting the book on how you interact with governments and get swift agreements on how to introduce a compound into the market. But it's also rewriting the book on how people work together. And yes, you need rules and you need roadmaps, etc. But more than anything else, I think you need to be able to be agile and bold in your decision making as you go forward. So it's good to have that background, but it's also good to realize that nothing is set in stone.
And so with this book being rewritten from many different angles, how would you summarize the key leadership challenges that you are now facing because of COVID-19? Obviously the list I think would be very long, but have you spent some time thinking about what would your top three challenges, or what are your top three challenges, and how would you summarize that for us?
I think it all started before I got involved in the project. So I must give a lot of credit to our leadership, and specifically then on how we looked at it. I mean, it was really all about, first and foremost, owning up to the situation. So this is something that would affect us internally and would affect us externally. So what is it that we want to do? I think being bold and agile around that whole principle was there from the very beginning. So that was a good way forward. I think then it's really important that you start thinking, okay, what is external, what is internal? Because let's not forget, every company that is facing COVID-19 is dealing with internal challenges as well. And I think there it's very important that the people in the company realize that caring about people is important, that you're consistent about it, that you do this in a way that reflects your values, that you're transparent and you show integrity, but also that you communicate clearly about it. And that's something that the team that is focusing on the internal challenge has been doing very consistently. We have been working with the leaders in the countries to ensure that we understood what their issues were. So that means that from the east to the west, so to speak, we have been working with the teams in China, in Hong Kong, in Japan, and others when they started moving to work from home and allowing them to do that. So not to have a dogmatic rule that says we as a company will do this. No, it's really making sure that you do that and you think about the specific situation in the various regions that we work with. So that is, I think, has been the case for us and will continue to be the case. You have to be listening, you have to be open to that, but you have to be bold in your decision making, you have to be very clear in your communications to your teams and your people on the ground. And of course, as a company, it's also very important that we take care of continuity, that we make sure that our products get to the patients that we deal with. And specifically for Gilead HIV, you cannot be in a period where the patient doesn't have a drug. So we have to make sure that those things are there too. So you have to make sure that, yes, you take care of your own people, but it's even more important to show to the outside world that you continue to care for the people that matter to you most, which are your patients. So that's the internal piece. I think the external piece is really, we had experience with coronaviruses and we had tested remdesivir in areas such as Ebola. So there are models from what we did in terms of in vitro work that we could say this could potentially work. But then it was all about speed and agility and being bold and being ambitious and feeling that we think we can potentially have a product that can provide benefits to patients who are suffering from COVID-19. But let's not forget that early January, February, we didn't know a lot about the disease. We didn't know a lot about people who get infected, develop the disease. So there was a lot of exploratory work to be done and a lot of risk taking. So again, when you talk about leadership styles, I think it's about that risk taking that you do and making sure that you go out with your plans around clinical, that you try to find the fastest route to regulatory approvals because you need to be there when the product and when the issue is still there. And then we felt, okay, what is the next step that we need to think about? We knew that from a manufacturing point of view, we were sitting on some stock that we had still from previous work. But we also knew that if the pandemic was really going to be of that magnitude that we now see it is, that we weren't going to get there with the manufacturing capacity that we had. So there was some very bold decisions being taken on moving that forward. And this was then the role of the team, I think, with senior management to make them understand what those steps were that we needed to make, to be very transparent about them, but also be able to take some decisions at risk, knowing that maybe they wouldn't come back to us in terms of would be able to use that product. And the final thing, of course, is also about access. I mean, what were the steps that we needed to take to make sure that people and patients would get access, not only through clinical trials, but then we had seen compassionate use. We have moved to expanded access, and now we're looking at the steps beyond. And then finally, of course, it's what do you think about pricing? I mean, this is not a normal environment. This is not even hepatitis C. We knew when we were in hepatitis C, there was a huge demand, but this is a different situation. This is affecting everyone. This is affecting the economy. So you have to be mindful about how you address that. And I think that's what you've seen in how then the decision was taken, how Dan has communicated about it as well. But what we want to do is to be respectful and mindful about that. That's why we were going for that donation initially. So these were some of the things that we're going through.
So let's talk a little bit about the leadership style that this environment requires. So I've jotted down as you were talking, agility, daring to take risks, making bold decisions, being forward thinking about doing things differently, like the access and pricing. Is that a good summary of the list of leadership characteristics that you think are coming to the forefront given the current environment?
Yeah, I was thinking about it as well, because we all have our core values, and the core values, I think, for most tend to be close to one another when you work in an ethical pharmaceutical environment. Then the leadership skills or capabilities that you link to that and have to be mapping close to each other. But I do believe that these elements around being bold, about making sure that you own up to the situation and you deal with it, making sure that you also very much listen to what is going on, because the people who deal with the disease on the forefront can tell us a lot more than what we know, but also our own people can tell us a lot more. And that's something that we want to do a lot. And I think that then links to sort of the core values that you have, which is all about transparency and integrity. And this is why I think it was so important for us to make sure that we, and still is, that we stay extremely close to our colleagues who work in the front line, who work close to stakeholders, that we communicate with them, understand what their needs are, and make sure that we give them the arguments and the facts so they can interact consistently and continuously with the people in the countries, because it's not just about developing a compound. If you are a general manager in France or a general manager in Germany, you get the health minister on your call. You get calls from the president's office, and you need to be able to manage that. So I think as a leader working within these teams, we all have to make sure that we provide answers, but that we are consistent about these answers, and that we are consistent in how we communicate both internally and externally. And I think that's, in terms of leadership skills, I think that comes down to, again, being transparent, showing that integrity to you as a person and as a company matters.
And could we easily translate that into a concept of purpose-led leadership? I mean, the transparency, the authenticity, you mentioned the focus on patients, you mentioned the donation that the company is making to ensure access. Do you think that this will end up driving our entire industry towards more visible purpose-led leadership? I think it's always been there, so don't misunderstand me. I think the patient has been at the center of many of the healthcare companies that we work with, but will this be a platform to solidify that, in your opinion, in the next generation leaders in the industry?
I think it has to be. And if I look at the way that we work with our teams, is then when you hear back from them, for instance, when the letters went out, when we talked about our donations, when we are able to provide therapies to patients in need, and you hear feedback from the treating physicians, then you start realizing through many people that this is why they joined the industry. This is why you work for this company. So I think, if anything, the purpose is becoming even more clear than it ever was. And it helps you to really crystallize on the things that matter now, that you need to deal with now. And everything else that is just on the edge of that doesn't really matter anymore.
So thinking about post-COVID-19, what do you think will be durable or a focus for leadership development?
Well, I think, again, let's stick to what we've learned and why people still keep putting these hours into this, and why people keep moving forward. And the thing is, the belief that at the core of what we do is the patient. And at the core of what we do is to make sure that we can bring innovation to as many patients as we can. I think that will drive everything that we do. Then the model behind that is the other thing that we've learned throughout of this. And what I see a lot is that teamwork is crucial. And those people who still believe in silos, they better wake up, because it's not the way you can deal with things. You have to work as teams, and you have to be agile. And yes, textbooks are good, but you have to think about what you really want to do and rethink about how you're going to do this. I don't think there's any normal anymore, as everybody knows that. But there's no normal way of doing business. There's no normal way of developing a compound. As we go back, everybody is learning on how we can really deal with the issues that you face today. I mean, we have, unfortunately, not the capacity yet to provide enough product to all patients, even if the product would show to be safe and effective, which we hope and believe it will be over time. But you deal with those things, and you have to think back on how you're going to do that. So the norm of being complicated, the norm of being heavy layered, the norm of working through a huge amount of processes, I think has to change. And I hope it will change.
And I guess one final follow-up to that, as you think about developing your next generation of leaders behind yourself and for the leadership cadre at Gilead, are you changing anything? How do we help next generation leaders develop this skill set?
I think one of the lucky things that we have within Gilead, of course, is that, yes, we have 9,000, 10,000 employees, but not as big as some of the others. So the ability for us to learn through this exposure and through this experience is there. So a lot of colleagues are involved in this whole experience. So we are able to communicate with our general managers, with the people who lead the functions through all these initiatives that we have. So I think there's already a learning taking place on how you do that. And at the end of the day, it's also examples from the top. It's how people communicate. It's how our CEO communicates, how our head of commercial communicates, our CMO communicates. That sets the tone for others. And that will help all, I think, future leaders to say, okay, how do I use that now going forward? And I'm sure we're just about rolling out our leadership commitments, that what we've just gone through or going through right now will impact on how we're going to do that with some clear examples and some learnings as we go forward. But at the end of the day, I hope that everybody takes a step back and says, okay, so what have I really learned from this experience with that in mind? And what is really core to what I do? And what is the purpose of why I'm in this industry? And how is it that I can, through my leadership and how I work with others, make this more efficient and make this more focused on what we're really all about, which is making sure that we drive innovation for patients.
Thank you, Luc. It's been a pleasure and inspirational as always. Good luck to you. We're counting on remdesivir, so good luck to you and the team. Any parting comments?
My parting comment is always like, when you get a challenge and people offer you the challenge, take it. Enjoy the journey. It's not always fun, but it doesn't have to be fun. But I think if you enjoy the journey, then you'll take a lot out of it. So that's what I would say. When people offer you a challenge like this, take it with two hands, say thank you very much, and go for it.
Thank you, Luc.